Hey there, everybody. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from Command Central at the Philanthropy Mastermind series, brought to you, of course, by our friends at DonorSearch. And as usual, we won't be saying much about them unless, of course, our guest today chooses to mention them. But that's not for any lack of affection, certainly not any lack of gratitude. DonorSearch is not only the leading provider of donor intelligence solutions in the marketplace in the US and elsewhere, but most importantly to us, everybody in this room and beyond, they've been making it possible for me to have conversations with people like our guest today, Wayne Olson, for now, well, since 2016. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of programs, many of which are recorded and placed on the DonorSearch site over at donorsearch.net, nestled in there along with a lot of other great resources. And also beside their complete suite of services to know more about your donors. So if you want to know more about them, and I hope you do, it certainly relates to our topic today, I hope you'll check them out over on donorsearch.net, as well as all the content from the Mastermind series, including upcoming programs. We also have a couple ways for you to interact today. You probably saw that right on the slides as we were beginning. Jack, our producer, has been running those slides for us, and he's also going to be moderating and monitoring the background as we do our chat and Q&A. Which I'm definitely going to open up now because I know we've got a lot of people in this room. So do feel free to utilize that throughout. We would love to hear from you as we are having our conversation today. And already we see Dr. Cheryl saying thank you. And so thank you. We appreciate having you all here and to have a conversation with Wayne Olson. And I'm going to do a brief introduction before we dive into a subject which I know you're here for, but the heart of it is donor relations, which is the heart of everything we do in philanthropy. The subject, of course, is be the difference so your donors can make a difference. That's Wayne's way of thinking about the subject. And like everything else he does, it's both brilliant and accessible. And that was the way I was introduced to him personally, was when I had a chance to hear him at a conference in Hawaii, although I certainly knew his reputation, which is broad and vast, throughout the sector. Today, you'll find him as Senior Director of Planned Giving for Shriners Children's. He may or may not be talking about that work today, but it's just one of many places where he has hung his hat and made it possible for donors to do their best work for missions of leading institutions. He's done that at Intermountain Healthcare and other places over the past couple of decades. He's also someone who has written a whole bunch of books, and he may allude to those today, but I want to just list a couple in case you like putting those things on your shelf like I do. And those include Fundraising for Nonprofit Board Members, which is available on his website at wayneolson.com, also on Amazon, because everything seems to be available there. But other works like The Disney Difference, and man, you have to hear him talk about Disney and how that connects to us. Very interesting. How to Give a Speech or a Presentation. You'll be seeing him do that. Big Gift, Small Effort, and Think Like a Donor, as well as his newest book, Words of Encouragement. So lots of different stuff there, and that's just a tiny thumbnail of all the work that he's done with us in the field. Wayne, thank you so much for hanging out today.
Man, thank you, Jay. I want to meet that guy that you just talked about. Brilliant and accessible. I don't know. I'm not sure who that guy is, but man, I want to meet him. So thank you.
Well, just stay here for the next few minutes, and I think you'll find him.
Oh my gosh.
This is fun. I don't know if you've interacted with many of the people in the room, and so let me just let you all know that if you have had the good fortune of talking with Wayne, either informally or through one of his presentations around the country, or have read one of his books, feel free to give a shout out. We would love to know that. We'll also use that as a space to just have a conversation throughout. So Wayne, today you had said we should talk about this issue about, broadly termed donor relations, although that doesn't really tell the half of it. So when you were suggesting this as the theme, tell me what you were thinking about, how that relates to a lot of your work and all of our work.
Sure. Jay, it's pretty simple, actually. We try to complicate things. We make things harder than they need to be. And the real answer to be successful as a fundraiser is to think like your donor. It's true in marketing. If you're designing a soft drink, you want to know what people want to drink. If you're designing a car, you want to know what people want to drive. And I think that it's so simple that we often overlook it, and we want to think like our donor. We want to see things from the donor's point of view. What motivates a donor to part with hard-earned money and give it to the cause we represent? And when you do that, everything works. And unfortunately, fortunately, let's say this, the people listening to this podcast probably want to think like a donor. And that's fortunate for them, because most people in an industry really don't want to think like a donor. And I can give you lots of examples of that. But it's unfortunate on one hand, but it's fortunate if you do want to stand out, if you do want to receive more gifts for your cause. If you think like a donor, you'll be ahead of the pack pretty quickly.
You said people don't think like donors in our sector, but most of us are donors. I mean, why is that? What's the barrier?
The barrier is pretty simple. We need money, and we're going to go out and go get it. And the quickest symptom checker I can give you for this is, if you're talking to a donor with personal pronouns, you're making a mistake. I want to tell you about our cause. We need this. Have you thought about giving this to us? And that is presenting that's treating in a very, I go right to the bottom line.
Mhm.
That's treating a donor like an ATM.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a list of things that I need, and you tell me which one of these you're going to fulfill. That's a little crude, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. When the opposite should be true. When I teach fundraising in a retreat or something like that, I use this example. I love the idea of people learning how to read. I want people to know how to read, but I cannot teach people how to read. I'm not a good teacher on reading. But you, Jay, run a charity that teaches people how to read, and you're very effective at it. Well, why don't I partner my money with your ability to teach people to read, and it works. And the question we need to ask a donor is, and I ask this question to donors all the time, you've been giving money to us for 10 years. Why do you do that? And I think sometimes we're afraid to ask that because we don't want to know the answer. But the truth is, it's a wonderful answer. I ask my wife that all the time too. Why did you marry me? And she gives me the answer, and it's great, because you know what it tells me? It says what I'm doing right and what keeps us married, and it helps me avoid the things that are not healthy. So it's a great question to ask. Why do you give to us?
I'm just
And
wondering
you can ask
if you get different responses over time, either from your wife or from your donors, when you ask that kind of question.
That's right. And that helps too. It's never a bad thing to do. And we should do that in meetings too. What worked about this campaign? What worked about this meeting or this event? And those are all good questions that we rarely ask.
Yeah. And what are we trying to find out when we're asking those kinds of questions? What are we really checking for?
Motivation. What's the motivation of the donor? Why do they do what they do?
Right. But do they always know? I mean, in other words, we want to trust. I mean, I trust people when they tell me things, unless there's some reason not to trust them. But
Sure.
Are we trying to listen for anything besides just the straight words? I mean, if we ask someone, why do you support the library? And they say, well, because I love books. Do we stop there? I mean,
No.
where do we go?
No, a great question, Jay. And that's where the professional side of our careers kicks in.
Hmm.
When you ask donors that enough, you learn how to interpret what they're saying. And of course, few of us actually say exactly what we mean. Even when we're trying to say what we mean, we really may have other reasons or motivations, or they may change. But as a professional, you can learn to see patterns. And you can, well, you said you like to learn how to read, or you like to read. What is it about reading that makes it special for you? And the key is to follow up with better questions. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is when you talk to a donor, everything you say to that donor should begin with one of these words: what, who, where, and why, maybe how. And just keep following up with those questions. They're open-ended questions. They're not yes or no. And again, most of the time we don't even ask questions to donors like that. We just say, will you give? Or I need this. And you follow up with those questions, and you shouldn't be satisfied with just one answer. Well, why do you give to Shriners Hospitals? Well, because I like to help children. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great, but tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? Tell me an experience you had. What happened? Why is that different than giving to a food bank? What is it about us that's different that you like? And you keep following up.
That makes sense to me. I wonder some people have difficulty either finding the right question, although you just gave us some great examples, or they're cautious about asking something that seems too sensitive or prying. Can you address that a little bit?
You're already doing the most sensitive thing you could ever do in your life, or one of the most sensitive things you could ever do in your life. You're asking somebody to part with money they worked for or inherited, or got some other way, but it's money that they could spend on themselves, their family, or friends, and you're asking them not to do that. Or you're already in the sensitive arena. And if you're having the conversation with the donor, you're already there. And the thing that donors appreciate is that you're taking the time to get to know them as opposed to getting to know their money. And that makes a big difference. And that people respond positively to that. I've never in 25 years have I had a donor say that's none of your business. As a matter of fact, they're often, or they're almost always, I can't think of a time when they're not. They're grateful because no one ever asks them those questions.
That's fascinating to me, and I'm just keeping an eye on the chat, and I did see Nicole had said finding the right questions, which is probably everybody's thing. If there are people in the room who have questions that they have offered to donors and prospective donors they found effective, or if they're wondering what the right questions are, we'd love to hear about that. What are some of the other ways that you kind of open the door for people and make it possible for them to really reveal what's important to them and why?
Again, I'm a simple person, Jay. I am not brilliant and accessible. I'm simple and simple. Shut up. Be quiet. Too often, the temptation is I've got the meeting with the donor. My boss has wanted me to meet this donor. I've been trying to put this trip together. I've got my brochure. I've got all the updates on the campaign, and I am just going to, boy, I can't wait to tell you, Mrs. Jones, what all the things that are going on at the zoo today. And I got to tell you about the new baby tiger that was born, and this and this and this. I'm just ready to talk to you because I've prepared. Well, be quiet. If you ever want to be called a brilliant conversationalist, shut up. And I'm serious. The best, man, he's such a great conversationalist. And when people say that, it's because you only said two things. I've sat with a donor for hours before where I've talked maybe 5% of the time. So, I mean, just listen, just be quiet and listen. And again, this is important, Jay, because the world values followers. The world values listeners. How many people follow your podcast? How many people follow your YouTube channel? How many people are on your LinkedIn profile? How many follow? The world doesn't say, how good a listener are you? It doesn't reward that. It doesn't seem to. And the reality is the leaders of this world are listeners. They're not talkers, they're listeners. And we don't do it enough.
Yeah, in fact, I'd love to hear more about that too, because it seems like the images that we have of leadership are often different from that. It's the loudest voice. It's the big, the big profile
Sure.
on certain media platforms. But you've worked with leaders in a number of different institutions over your span of your work.
Sure.
So is that truly emblematic of leadership, of just being quiet and listening, not only externally for donors, but also internally at staff? And can you talk about that a bit more? I think that might be useful for people to hear.
Yeah, sure. I'm not a psychologist. I need to tell you that right off the bat. This is all practical knowledge I've gained over the years. But I teach leadership, and there's two phrases I love about leadership. And I tell this to people who want to be a leader. And it's this. The leader is not the person in an organization with the title. That sounds counterintuitive. It might be the person with the biggest paycheck or the best office, but it's not necessarily the person that's the heart and soul of the organization. And I'm willing to bet you that 3/4 of the people on this podcast right now, they're going, you're right, because the leader is really Mrs. Jones, the volunteer that shows up in the lobby of the hospital every day at 5 a.m. She's been here for 35 years, and we don't do anything without asking her. The leader is not the person with the title. The leader is the person the heads turn to when a difficult question is asked. If you're ever in a boardroom and you want to see who really is running the show, Ask a difficult question and see who the heads turn to. And chances are that's a person who listens more than talks. The person at the head of the table is doing the talking. The person the heads turn to is the one that really makes the decision. And the second thing I'll talk to you about that I'd say about leadership, and this goes to the silence part. People follow leaders based not on what they say, but what they do. I lead a number of people in my organization, and I'm always conscious of the fact that I can tell them all day long how great they are or what they've done well, and I try to do that often. I never want them to doubt how much I appreciate them. But I also know that goes far, but what goes further is me being the kind of people, or me being the kind of person that I want them to be. I'm not going to ask them to do anything I wouldn't do, and I'm not going to. I want them to see me as an example, not as somebody that just gives orders or commands. That's not a leader. That's a manager. And the world needs more leaders. It's got plenty of managers, but we need leaders.
I didn't even know we were going to go down this path today.
I didn't either.
Jumped
I'm not
right
ready
in.
for this, but I'll give you my best, Jay.
But
I'm ready.
I love it, and I think everybody else does too. Because
Good.
if I wasn't watching in real time, but I'm seeing those comments saying so true, and my favorite, which is yep. So that's the ultimate affirmation from Colton.
I thought we were going to talk about needlepoint today. I'm really stunned by this. So I was ready. I've got my yarn right here under the desk, and I've got all kinds of tips or model railroading, either one.
You're weaving a yarn right now, so
that's right.
Pull out the needles. Yes, we have comments here just saying wonderful advice from Chantel, and actions speak louder than words, which I think was one way of talking about your point.
Sure.
And then we do have a question here. I think it's a question from Nancy saying, how can you open the door to donors that are not historically your donors, but are a perfect fit? In their case, they have a huge list of donors that may not be familiar with them. So how do you intro yourself? Or in other words, begin that conversation? Since we're already talking about this, how do you begin that conversation in a way that possibly gains them to care about your mission, and maybe builds trust as well?
Sure. Here's the answer. And it's going to, hopefully, it'll sound amazingly consistent with everything I've said so far, because I want it to be consistent. Let them be your teacher. Mrs. Smith, you know, we're building a new library, and you know, there are people in our community like you who we think would be a natural fit for the library. Can you tell me how I should approach people like you to help raise funds for this project? Let them be your teacher. You could lead by example, and leading by example is showing somebody that you're willing to learn from them. And I think that's the only approach that works. Otherwise, anything else you say is going to fall under the category of, I'm building a library. What can I count on you to do for me to make it happen?
Yeah, it seems kind of extractive is the way I think about that. It's asking people to do things for you instead of do things possibly with you.
It's perfectly acceptable. It's laudable and practical to say. And you got to be honest. You can't be deceptive.
Right.
You know, Mrs. Smith, I'd love to get some advice from you, and I'm trying to raise money for this zoo. I'd love to meet with you and get your advice. And here's the key, and this is something that I stick to, and I would encourage all of your viewers and listeners to stick to, is keep your word. If I go to that meeting and she hands me a check, I will tell her, you know what, I made a promise to you that I was only going to get advice from you today, and if I take that check from you, I'm going to break my promise. Now, if you want to mail it to me, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you from that. Or if we meet again, that's great. I'll take the check then. But today, I want to keep my promise. And my promise was I wasn't here to ask for money, nor accept money. I was here to get advice. I promise you, she will not. Well, he had his chance and he blew it. The donor will appreciate that honesty, because too many other people will take it and run and try and switch the conversation to that as fast as they can, when we really should be trying to honor the purpose of the meeting.
How much is familiarity first important in having these conversations? Because to a point that Nancy is making in the chat, is this something you can entertain with strangers, or do you need to give people time to kind of germinate, build trust, and so forth before you're providing these questions that may require some introspection and involvement or engagement.
If somebody, it depends on how you define stranger, but if somebody is truly a stranger, don't waste their time or your time. If somebody's a stranger, you don't have a good reason to talk to them. The typical reason to talk to them is they have a lot of money, right. But you don't know anything about them other than they have a lot of money. That's how I define stranger. Mm-hmm. Nancy may have a different definition. I really like to hear it, but don't waste their time. Don't waste your time, and stick with people. I would rather raise $50 from somebody that I know than try for $500 from a stranger, because most of the time you're not going to get that $500 anyway. It just doesn't happen. You might get what I call, or what a lot of us call, going away money, but that is going away money, and you can never go back again. And if you talk to that person who's giving you the $50 and you say, Mrs. Jones, thank you so much for this. Do you have any friends I should talk to? Then she might introduce you to somebody capable of giving you that $500, and that person's no longer a stranger. That's a friend of a friend.
Right. Very different kind of
much different.
Right. And wow, I'm sure we both have plenty of examples of that, because especially for the people who are very wealthy and people are approaching them all the time who don't have any connection to them or to the mission or to the organization or to the board or to anybody else, and they're just going and visiting with them, and it's very tough. It's tough on everybody, including the donor. Well, we jumped right into the thick of things, and I know that there were a lot of other things that we were going to be talking about today, and some of them I have some notes on, thanks to you. So that'll guide us a little bit back into this issue of donor relations, or maybe even stewardship, which I guess gets to the heart of that question about, are we talking to people just because we think they have resources that we'd like to have? Or are we talking to people that care about the same things we do, and we want to build a relationship of trust so they can invest in the things that we both think are important, which seems like a different sort of thing. But I guess that begs the question, which is, what is the number one reason why we don't receive more gifts?
Well, everyone on the podcast knows, because we've said it so many times, and it's because we fail to see it from their point of view. We fail to see things from the donor's point of view. We see it from our point of view. And I'll give you a great example. During 2 weeks into the pandemic, March of 2020, I received an email from a charity that I supported, that, by the way, I don't support anymore. And it said, "We need your money now more than ever." And I'm thinking, wow, I'm pretty depressed. Things are pretty rotten around here, and everyone's scared, and it's weird. And now I got somebody heaping more misery on me by telling me that they need my help now more than ever. And by the way, everything in that sentence is wrong. We need your help. Fund us. But I also thought, man, they're either incredibly incompetent or they're lying, because this organization is 100 years old. They've been through the Great Depression, the recession, 2 world wars, all kinds of countless maladies. And now, just 2 weeks into a pandemic, they need my help now more than ever. That's a cheap throwaway line that does not ring true. And of course, I analyze it because I'm in the business of analyzing stuff like this, and I care about marketing of nonprofits. But even on some level, all of us know, boy, that's just not true. Or it's just fake. There's something bad about that.
Yeah.
And we need to be on. We need to think about things from our donor's point of view. If I were on that team, I would have done it this way. It happened to be a zoo, and I would have done it like this. We know times are tough, but Bozo the chimpanzee really misses seeing you because we've been closed for 2 weeks. You know what we've done? We spent $20 on a webcam, and we put it in front of Bozo, and now you can watch Bozo 24 hours a day and bring a smile to your face. And you know what? If you want to pay for $10, we'll have a trainer go in and throw a ball to Bozo for 10 minutes, and you can watch Bozo. You get to choose the color of the ball that Bozo plays with. For $20, Bozo gets a drum or something else. You bring fun and joy in a world that badly needs it, as opposed to heaping more misery on people. And that's seeing things from the donor's point of view, not ours. Give them something they don't have, rather than asking them to give you something you think you want.
And that doesn't start and end with the latest crisis or the latest crisis that people are taking advantage of, because I'm thinking about two examples of right there. And this is not just dwelling on video. It's about things that engage with people, make them feel better in a world where we often feel isolated
Right.
from one another, like the Panda Cam at the National Zoo, which
Yep.
has been a hit forever, or totally different organization, Charity Water. What happens for people who donate for a well? They set up the webcam there so people can see people
Yep.
getting water, so they don't have to have children carrying a vase on their head for miles to bring water back to their families. They can see that the water is pumping out of a well and you were a part of it. So those kinds of things are really, really powerful.
Don't you think people who give to Charity Water, when their friends come over at night, hey, you got to see this video. We gave $50 to this outfit in Texas called Charity Water. I think it's in Texas. And look what they've done.
Yeah.
Look at this. We sent them money and they were nice enough to send us this video. Look at what they did with our money.
Right.
That spreads.
Again, in case anybody wants to suggest anything, I don't know if any of your organizations out there have done things sort of along those lines, but that would be really interesting to hear. Or if you know of examples of other charities that have found ways to engage with people, kind of meet them where they are, so they feel like they're a part of the action, not just an ATM machine, as you were saying, Wayne. Yeah. So we really appreciate that. And thank you.
By the way, Jason, forgive me for most of our listeners and viewers, ATM machine is a machine you used to go to get something called cash. Cash is kind of like Venmo, but on paper. And they got different portraits on there, and it's an old, don't worry about it, but just think of it as Venmo, but in a machine on a street corner.
Thank you. Yes. And
I should have clarified when I mentioned what an ATM is. So.
That's there are so many things we shouldn't refer to that show our longevity. Yes. But so for those who don't know what cash is, there you go. Yes. So that's one view, is just that piece about why don't we receive more gifts? Is there something that we can do that's really simple, besides setting up the webcam? Something that's really simple that helps to improve our relationships with current and future donors.
I love that word, simple. Thank your donors. Thank your donors. I teach all over the country, and I'm amazed at the number of CEOs and chief development officers of nonprofits that will stand up and argue with me and tell me, and these are their words, I'm too important to send a thank you. I don't have time to send thank you notes to people. And I'll give you a real example. A friend of mine died, a very good friend, and he named me as executor of his estate. And he gave $1 million to the university that I used to work at. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I said, here's the final check from his estate. Now it's up to $1 million. You've now gotten $1 million. Please give me an update on how his scholarships are doing. I'm the representative of the estate, of his family. I'm it. I got a letter back. It was 3 sentences. And the word thank you didn't appear anywhere in the letter. And they never got me an update on the scholarships. Never came. Never thank you, never anything. And I was hurt by that. I'm like, didn't you read my letter? Did you either not read it or just ignore it? You made a decision that I really didn't need to know about the scholarships. And I'm stunned. $1 million. $1 million. And no thank you. And that's crazy. But that's real. And I see it all the time. Just thank your donors.
I want to delve into this a little bit, because it's been a point of controversy over the last several years.
Sure.
And especially with organizations that have more limited resources. It may not be a feeling of pride, like I'm too important for that, or at least that's not what people say, but rather that we just don't have the time in order to do the work in the field. We can't just go around writing all these notes to donors. We've got to do the work. And in fact, there was a big piece in the Chronicle of Philanthropy talking about precisely this. And to the Chronicle's credit, they had notes on both sides, responses to the article, to the op-ed, with saying the pros and cons of thank you notes. Before I ask you any more about this,
sure.
When you or I write a note, about how long does it take to just write a card? I'm not saying something I have to think about all day, but just a
sure.
note. How long does it take, do you think?
From start to finish, 10 minutes at the most.
Okay. So 10 minutes. And 10 minutes is real time if you're trying to feed people or,
Yep.
save anything that's on the verge of extinction or help a houseless family. That's all true. But 10 minutes. 10 minutes for how much revenue potentially? Like in the case of your friend who passed.
$1 million.
So now, why do you, beyond the self-important CEOs that we all run into once in a while, for the rest of us in development, working with nonprofits, just trying to do our own thing, why do you think most people aren't writing those thank you notes?
Jay, that's a good question. I think it's because the world teaches us to climb the mountain, and the world does not teach us to come down safely from the mountain. That you want to get to the mountaintop, which is the gift.
Yeah.
And we celebrate the gift and we're done. Rarely, not never, but rarely does the CEO say in that meeting where everybody's clapping, "Hey, I got the big gift. Okay, did you send a note to thank them?" Because we got it. We got the money. What else is there to do? And it does take time. And there's also another level of this. You're vulnerable. When you send a thank you note, it's personal. And there's a feeling that, wow, I'm exposing myself to this person and my feelings, and I'm thanking them. It's a little bit of humility. And again, the world doesn't reward or demonstrate that for us. And conversely, rarely are we thanked for things, which, going back to the leadership we were talking about earlier, that's why I thank my staff. I do not take them for granted. They may be on this podcast. If they disagree, put it in the comments. I need to know that. But I want them to know that I appreciate them and I'm grateful for them. And I realize they have a choice just like our donors do. They could leave and go somewhere else. And I don't think they're going to. I don't think they want to. But I think it's my job to make sure that that remains the case.
Right.
Same with the donors. It's all the same stuff.
We have had a number of comments in that that are really great, and one that's really fun. So
okay,
about during the pandemic, a donor who offered to dress up in a bunny suit and drive by the homes of anyone who made a donation, which I think is hilarious. And by the way, Alicia, if you have photos of that, or if you ever want to come on the show and talk about that, we'd love that. Yeah. But also some other comments here about this issue, about finding the time and about the importance of this. So ER had said, my organization exists to help college donors give. Well, reach out to me about what's possible to get a scholarship updates from the university recipient. And then we have, a note here from, I think it's Kel, excuse my vision, saying that they use template letters. And this is very interesting because in the age of AI, this has become even simpler. It doesn't mean that we are relieved of the responsibility of doing this sensitively and personally, but as they're pointing out, they use template letters with interchangeable bullet points, right?
Yep.
To directly address what the donor's interest is, to put together letters by topic. Directors then can choose to personalize with a handwritten note when signing the letter, and all gifts of $25 or more. I love this. All gifts of $25 or more receive a letter. From a penny to $24, they receive an email thank you. But even there, that is better than 3/4 of the organizations I gave to at the end of last year, which only sent me a digital receipt. Is this your experience too? Lots of digital receipts now, but very few of any other kind of communication?
Yeah, and you're right, Jay. It's all email and digital, and most of them end up in my junk email box, and I never see them.
Yeah.
And I want to give. I'm going to take away, but I'm going to give too. Hey, a thank you letter is better than nothing. But I don't like thank you letters. I like thank you notes. And the difference is a letter is something on 8.5 by 11 stationery and it's printed or typed. A note is something using this. And okay, I've taken away, I'm saying, look, a letter is not as good as a note. Well, here's what I'm going to give you. A note should never be more than 3 sentences, maybe 4 if they're really short. But keep it simple and use these things. Real stamps.
Oh, I didn't know what I was looking at for a minute. I had no idea what you were.
These are real U.S. postage stamps, and as you can see, I'm missing a lot of them because I use them. And by the way, I go to the post office and I say, I want to see what stamps you have because I want colorful stamps. I don't want my donor to see a postal meter because that says your letter is one of 1,000 we mailed out today.
Okay.
I want them to see, and they may not open the letter. I know a lot of people throw their mail away without opening, which is a mistake, but I want them to know that this is a real human being sending a real letter. And
Yeah.
you only have to do 3 sentences. That's it.
Yeah. And yes, Lorraine, we agree. That's very cool with the stamps. And John, who's saying that they work in an elementary school and they add a short handwritten note on their tax letter to any size gift.
Yeah.
I used to work with an ambassador. That was my first role in fundraising after I was a grant maker. And the ambassador we sent out a note to everybody. This was, of course, back in the dinosaur age, so that was the only way to do things. But they insisted that the letter would be brought to them for any size gift, and they would cross out the name of the addressee. They'd write the first names. We'd have to supply it. They wouldn't remember all these people, and then they'd write a the personal signature, and often they'd write some kind of postscript. But it was never long. It was always one sentence. And how long did it take them? It took them maybe 30 seconds. The biggest grief actually was for the staff. If we didn't hand that letter over to be postscripted, we got in a little bit of hot water. But really what it was about was, I think, the thing you're talking about. It was certain ways of having and maintaining relationships with people, and who better than an ambassador to, hopefully be able to do that.
Yeah. And Jay, you can cheat on this too. Instead of you writing a thank you note, I'm always going to tell you to write a thank you note, or me to write a thank you note. Get a volunteer to write a thank you note.
Sure.
Yeah, hey, dear Mrs. Jones, I'm one of the people who benefited from your gift.
Right.
I now have a new hand, a new prosthetic hand, because you gave to the prosthetic center. Thank you. Yeah. I'm writing this letter with my new hand.
Oh man, well, that would bring tears. Absolutely. But they would be real. It's not manipulative. You're saying if the volunteer felt that they wanted to do that, you give them a way to show their gratitude, and it makes the donor feel well. So everybody feels
scholarship recipient, zookeeper, you name it.
Right.
I'm the zookeeper for Bozo the chimpanzee. Man, he loved the bananas. Thank you.
I want to meet this Bozo because we keep referring to him.
I do too, but the zoo went out of business because they're in the hardest times they've ever had. So they
really
lost.
The zoo is
no, I don't.
I thought you were serious. I mean, are the animals free? What happened?
No, I think they're still around.
Oh wow! I hope so. But otherwise, we all need to get together in this room and find a way to help these animals. There was comments again coming in here about, for example, at our previous organization. This is from Gina. There was a stewardship committee that consisted of board members and volunteers, and I've seen this too in rooms where they're involved. They called every donor who made a gift on a monthly basis. Nice way to involve board members and volunteers, which is something we haven't really talked about. There's kind of this good loop of feeling here, because the people who are writing the notes, actually, there's, at least for some of us, is a bit of a rush. After that initial feeling that maybe some people have that you described of, I feel like I'm being vulnerable, then if one gets accustomed to it, feels comfortable, it starts to feel like, wow, isn't this great that I get to be able to, share some love with somebody who's made something possible. It's a very different feeling.
That's right.
So thank you for all these comments here. I'm not addressing all of them, but they're great. All of the scholarship recipients receiving handwritten notes. Thank you, Kyle. So you have another thing here that you were suggesting we talk about, and that's why do we miss donors?
We ask them to conform to us rather than us conform to them.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. What?
I worked for a university once. We were building a library, and we were building a football stadium. And we had too many people wanting to put money in the football stadium and not enough in the library. By the way, a library is something where you'd go and they'd have these things with paper that you usually see on screens today. Sorry, I can't resist the dinosaur jokes. And the donor's interest in giving to so I have a donor that wants to give to the stadium, and my boss has said to me, hey man, we've got enough money for the stadium, you've got to get money for the library. And I think that a lot of us have experienced this. You go to the donor whose home looks like a shrine to the football team at the university, and you're saying, hey, we appreciate your interest in the football stadium, but you really need to give money to the library. Come on, Mr. Jones. You really need to give money to the library because the stadium's going to take care of itself. You'll be shown the door because we're asking the donor to align to us as opposed to us aligning to the donor. And that's a pretty clear example, but we do it all the time. Well, I appreciate your interest in cancer, but we're raising money for heart disease today, and we really need you to give. Well, I've lost 4 family members to cancer, and it's really important to me. Well, that's fine, but we really are trying to build a new X-ray machine for the cardiac unit or something. You've got to look at things. We miss donors because we ask them to listen to us as opposed to us listening to them.
Wayne, can I follow up on that with
Sure.
kind of reverse, and also to tie into a comment that I saw in the chat, which I think is important from Kate. But I'm going to get to that by kind of reverse osmosis or something. That's the wrong scientific illusion. But anyway, one part of that is we miss the donors by trying to get them to align to what we want. So in other words, it's all about us.
Right.
A lot of us would argue that, well, of course it is, because if we don't do the work, people don't eat. Students don't go to school. But let's just put that aside for a second. Sure. But another thing that happens is when donors offer us something, and they expect us to do that, and we say, sure, we'll change what we do to fit what you want. Mm-hmm. So does that happen as well? And how do we make sure we're not missing the donors, but the donors aren't missing us, I guess?
Well, if the donor wants to give to something that's not part of your core mission, we need to accept that and move to another donor who does want to believe in our core mission. And if we have too many people that don't believe in our core mission, we need to have a serious talk with ourselves about what we're doing.
Right.
Again, it's not hard. It's simple. And I think too often we feel like, well, this person's got a lot of money and it's just a matter of us sweet talking them the right way to get them to come around to to our brilliant point of view that we know better than him where his money should go. And I just don't believe that. And more importantly, I've never seen it play out in real life. You might get going away money from somebody, but that's just going away money. It's not real.
And by that you mean shoot.
Yeah. Here's a check, leave. No, I will admit this. There are times when, going back to your question earlier, there are times when people may really have an interest in the library and they're hiding it because they really want to give to the stadium. And they might have some kind of a latent desire to give to the library that you can help bring out. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about people who've made up their minds or have made up their minds they're not interested in what we're selling. And I just think it's foolish to try and convince them otherwise when there's so many people out there who do believe in your mission. They just haven't been contacted.
Right. Part of the reason I asked that is because I wanted to honor 2 parts of this conversation again that seems to be happening a lot in our field and has been for a number of years, which is sometimes labeled as donor-centric versus community-centric. Sure. And I must admit that I'm of the school that says that I believe that what we do is human-centric, which means that there's an opportunity to show love to everybody, and that's, of course, the Greek definition of philanthropy anyway. But sure. But I do want to honor that question because this is an important point. So if we are doing the things that you were describing earlier, sure. taking that 10 or 15 minutes to write a note or things like that, do you see that as kind of supplicating to a donor of doing things to satisfy their ego, or is it doing something that really just, I mean, how do you address this concern that we are losing a measure of control over mission by showing more gratitude rather than less to the people who fund these projects?
That's a very good question, and I've got an hour's worth of answers just to that one question, Jay. And by the way, the verb I would use is not supplicating, it's reciprocating. A donor has given us something. If we don't say thank you, they've done more than we have. And we're going to go use the money for good things, but okay, good. He could have given that money to somebody else to go do good things. We want the donor to know that his money or her money is going to do good things as they intended. And I think that completes the equation. And I think that it's foolish, forgive me, I don't mean to offend anybody, but to think it's our mission well, we have all the answers. We know what the community needs and we're ready and we've got all the answers. No, it's a partnership. It goes back to what I was saying before. We are the vehicle that people use to together we accomplish something. No car runs without fuel. And it's that marriage between the fuel and the vehicle that works. The fuel alone does nothing. The car alone does nothing. The mission alone does nothing. Money sitting in somebody's account does nothing. It's that combination that matters, and that's the community. It's not what our idea of the community is. It's what us combined with other people are. And if we have a feeling that, let's say that our mission is to plant trees all over town, and we're just not finding people who want to give us money to plant trees, and we just, well, man, these people are dumb. Why don't they see the need for these trees? They're wonderful. They give us fresh air and bird nests and all these wonderful things. How come these people don't get it? I just need to get money from whoever I can so that we can go plant these great trees. If we're not getting responses, we shouldn't blame the people who are not giving us money. We need to examine ourselves and figure out, we've got a really great mission. Why isn't it resonating with the right people? Yeah. And I think that's the key. It's to recognize people for who they are and value them for what they are, and figure out how our mission connects with the people who are going to make it happen. And going back to my car now, and I'm making this up as I go along with these metaphors, but it works. Diesel fuel is great. If you put that diesel fuel in my car, it will ruin it. It will total the car. Mm-hmm. And if you put regular gas in a diesel car, I think it'll do the same thing. Both are fantastic. The car is fantastic. But if you're not putting the right fuel in the right vehicle, nothing works. So we need to make those partnerships work with the right people. And then it's beautiful. If you try and partner with the wrong people, you just get a pile of metal that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. And to your point earlier about making sure things are not anachronistic, and in a few minutes on YouTube, these cars that are running on things called gasoline and diesel, those are the things they sold in California before the year 2030.
That's right.
So now,
well, even the Tesla runs on natural gas and coal, but we won't talk about that.
Oh yeah. Let's not even mention that company founder's name, because then who knows where we'll go in the chat. But I do want to ask you, this is almost the tactical part of this conversation, which is now can we talk about some creative ways to cultivate these prospects and donors? And I know you have a million, but can you give us a few?
Use your imagination and don't be constrained by budget. And I just gave you some quick shots. I had a fundraising event, or had an event to thank our donors. Surprise, surprise. I had an event to thank our donors, and I had like no budget. I'm like, well, what can I do? And it would happen to be a legacy society, and it was named for a woman who founded the university with a bequest 150 years ago. Her name was Charlotte. And I wanted to do something special for our donors. And I'm like, well, gosh, I don't have a budget, but I work for a university and we have a drama department. So I called the drama department. I said, hey, do you have anybody over there that could portray Charlotte for 2 hours on a Saturday morning at a breakfast? And she did, for free. And she loved it. She showed up to this breakfast for our donors in the Legacy Society, and it was her party. She stayed in character. Even when I met her in the morning at daybreak, before anybody got there, she was in character in a period costume that she had. It was free. It was in the wardrobe of the theater department. And she said, well, hi, Mr. Frost. My name is Charlotte, and I want to welcome you to my party in my university. I was so happy to see that you've helped contribute just like I have. And she greeted every guest, posed for pictures, cost me nothing, and people raved about it. You can do things like that all the time. We at a similar event, it was a homecoming weekend, and we gave flowers to all of the people who came to our little carnations, $1 each. Probably could have had them donated, but we paid $100 total, maybe $200. And all day long, people were asking, where did you get that beautiful flower on your lapel? Well, I'm a member of the Charlotte Society. And again, it doesn't cost much money, but I wanted to look at it from the donor's point of view. Wouldn't it be cool to see something you don't get everywhere else? Get to meet a 150-year-old woman or 180-year-old woman, whatever she would be. And you get this flower. And we have a donor at Shriners who collects aluminum cans. And He sends us a check for $100 every time he collects enough cans to take them to the metal, whatever you call it, the metal place, the recycling center. Yeah, and he gets this check for $100 and he gives it to us. So I went over and met him, and he's got this garage full of crushed cans, and it's just the dearest. He's 90 years old, a widower, and I said, Mister So and So, you are so wonderful. By the way, in my thank you letter to him, I said, dear Mister, I said something like this: Dear Angel, this gift could not possibly have come from a human being. It's just too sweet. It surely must have come from an angel, and that angel's name is John Doe. And but I asked him. I said, you're doing all this great work, and you're collecting these cans for us, and he collects money for other charities too. I said, what can I do to thank you? And he said, send me a birthday card. So I said, okay, that's fine. Tell me when your birthday is. Oh, you'll remember that. It's Halloween. Got it. And Jay, I can tell you, I will never forget that his birthday is Halloween. And just yesterday, actually, I had a birthday card, and we were circulating it around our headquarters, getting as many people to sign it as I can. And the card is free, by the way, because one of the offerings we give for annual fund donors is a different set of cards, so we didn't have to pay for the card. It's just a leftover. And but that doesn't matter, because it's the signatures that count. It's the ink on the paper that counts. And my supervisor and I are going to take him to dinner on October 30th. And it was really cute when I called him and I say, hey, we're gonna take you to dinner. How's that sound? Well, you know what? We ought to go to Olive Garden, because they got free bread there and free salad. You got it. You want to go to Olive Garden? That's where we're going to go. So there's a lot more to that story, but just use your imagination.
Yeah.
What tools do we have laying around that I could use in a new way? We have a drama department. We have an athletic department. We have these leftover birthday cards. Just look at everything from a new point of view, and you're amazed at what opens up in front of you.
Yeah. I know that we're getting close to the end here, and we kind of inverted a lot of the conversation when we jumped right in. So yeah. I apologize for that. But I do want to allude once again, before we kind of wrap up, with whatever questions might be here from the folks in the room with us, as well as whatever else you'd like to share, Wayne. I want to allude to your books again, because when I first heard you talking, it was about Disney. And and what we do seems so far apart in terms of worlds. So I'm springing this on you, but I suspect that you probably have a very succinct reason for why you think there's a connection between what they do, whether or not people like Disney, what they do very well, I think we can all agree, and what we do well when we do it right, in terms of the way we feel. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then maybe tell people again where they can get your books?
Sure, be happy to. That's a great question, Jay. And again, I'm going to go to the bottom line. I could talk about a lot of esoteric stuff and how Disney does things. I wrote a book about it, so there's a lot of stuff out there on it. But I can tell you exactly how we're the exact same thing as Disney. And that's whether you're going to a theme park. I live a few miles from Walt Disney World. I've been there. I stopped counting it 1,000 times. Research. Actually, it has a lot of research. You know what? Here it is. Whether you're reading a book, seeing a movie, going to the theme park, after you've spent your money, all you have to show for it is a good feeling. If I go out and buy a sandwich, well, it's going to keep me alive. Or I go out and buy a couch, that's something I can sit on for a long time. Or anything else, you're going to have some kind of a utility value. When you go to a Disney theme park, it's over almost as soon as it began. And all you're leaving with is a good feeling. By law, because we're a nonprofit, the only thing we offer our donors is a good feeling. And the key is to do everything we can to give them, within reason, a good feeling. We can learn a lot from Disney and Coca-Cola and Apple and a whole bunch of other people on how to give people a good feeling. without going broke. You know, Disney's having a tough time right now, but their bank account's still a lot bigger than mine. And, you know, it's about giving them a good feeling. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're supposed to do. Public's the same thing. We're shopping as a pleasure.
And that's how we can go back to the title of this.
Yep.
That's how we can be the difference, so the donors can make the difference.
You better
and
believe
that's
it.
different from Disney too. I mean, Disney, some people may love it, some people may not love it. It's a company, it's there to make money. We are making a difference every time we do the work. And so we just have to make it possible for people to join us in it.
Yeah, Jay, you mentioned my books a couple times. I'll offer this to you and to the viewers, listeners. If you go to my website, wayneolson.com, and if you want to, you can buy my books at Amazon. You asked me where to get them. Amazon, obviously. If you go to my website, wayneolson.com, and enter the code J-A-Y, you get a 25% discount. I'll do that for you, Jay. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jack, can you put that in the chat, please?
And I just retooled the website. The code will certainly work. If you have any trouble with it, give me a call or an email, and I'll make sure it works for you. But code J, and you get 25% off.
J. Okay, well, that's easy.
J-A-Y. Code J.
And if people want to just talk with you more, hear more from you, where are you speaking soon? Do you have an engagement somewhere soon or anything like that?
I'm going to be speaking at the National Philanthropy Day in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Wow. Well, I don't know how many of us will be there.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And I'll be in Texas again early in 2024, and a couple other places coming up all over the place. Hawaii is on the agenda soon again, Jay, and lots of neat places coming up. I love speaking. I love training. I love the look on somebody's face when, you know, just one little idea makes a difference for them. That just gives me all kinds of energy and excites me tremendously to help people.
Thank you. And if people want to just follow your work, I know they can on your website. So
Yep.
Jack has already noted that down there. And people can find you, I guess, on LinkedIn, and
That's
probably
right.
pretty easily just looking around the block. And they can also learn more about Shriners. I know you're not here to talk about Shriners, but if you're not familiar with their work, if you haven't seen those commercials,
Yep.
How can people learn more about Shriners as well?
ShrinersChildren'sLegacy.org. ShrinersChildren'sLegacy.org.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne, for all this. Really do appreciate you. All the stories, all the direct language, and all the encouragement for us to do the right thing. We really appreciate you.
Jay, I'm honored to be here, and thanks for inviting me, and thank you all for listening too. I appreciate it. And Jay, we've been talking about doing this for a long time. I'm so grateful we got to do it today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for hanging out today. We're seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat and hearing a lot of beeps. Sorry about that. But it's great to have you here. And I hope you come join us again on Thursday. We have another couple of terrific guests. So watch for that over in the list at DonorSearch.net. Under the resources tab, you'll see their entire calendar of activities, including Thursday's session, which is for CFRE credit. So if you're gathering up those credits, I know you'll enjoy having that one. It's a great session. Came direct to us from AFP with a couple of top folks from Campbell & Company. So you can learn all about it there. And if you are not on the list to receive these communications, just go in and make sure you sign up for the list on the homepage at DonorSearch.net. But stay tuned for 1 second, because you'll also see a little QR code to learn more about the rest of what they do, as well as how to follow the rest of what we do here. And finally, if you have any questions or suggestions for what we do in the future, I want those. We want you. All you have to do is write me a note. That's J-A-Y at DonorSearch.net, or find me on LinkedIn or wherever else you want to go on the internet. I'll be there and looking forward to talking to you. So until next time, take care.
Bye-bye, everybody.